My mother rolled her eyes. "You're just a receptionist, stay in your lane." I smiled. "Sure, Mom." 6 months later, she attended my tech conference as a guest. I, 28 female, have always had a rocky relationship with my mother Janice, 58 female. She's the kind of woman who measures success by degrees, titles, and appearances. When I took a receptionist job after college, she basically decided I'd failed. One Thanksgiving, she outright told me, "You're just a receptionist, stay in your lane." I just smiled and said, "Sure, Mom." But what she didn't know was I was teaching myself to code at night, slowly moving into real tech work behind the scenes. 6 months later, I gave a keynote speech at a major tech conference in Austin. She showed up, sat in the front row, and afterward acted stunned. Now she brags about me to her friends like she always supported me. I'm still processing everything, and honestly, I'm not sure how to feel. A part of me is proud, but another part is angry. It feels fake. Growing up in a suburb just outside Austin, life was a carefully staged play: manicured lawns, the right brand of SUVs parked neatly in driveways, neighborhood barbecues where everyone pretended their marriages were perfect. My mother thrived in that environment. Appearances mattered more than anything else. My older brother Simon went to medical school straight out of undergrad. My sister Amelia aced her LSATs and landed herself a spot in one of the top law schools in the country. I, on the other hand, floated a bit. After getting a degree in English, a choice my mother referred to as cute but impractical, I struggled to find a job that didn't feel like slowly drowning. When I landed a receptionist position at a small but promising tech company downtown, it wasn't glamorous, but it paid my bills. It also gave me breathing room, something I realized I hadn't had in a long time living under my mother's microscope. At family dinners, the conversations always drifted into territory I dreaded. Simon's surgical rotations, Amelia's summer internship at a prestigious firm. When they asked me what I did, it was always a polite nod, maybe a "good for you," but mostly it was followed by awkward silence. The worst came at Thanksgiving. We were sitting around the table, my mother carving the turkey with precision, when out of nowhere she laughed and said, "You're just a receptionist, Elise. Stay in your lane." I remember the way the room went silent, the clink of silverware against plates. I smiled, lifting my wine glass to my lips, and said, "Sure, Mom." But something inside me hardened. She saw someone who was stagnant. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that every night after work, I was huddled over my laptop, watching YouTube tutorials and taking free online courses in programming. Python, JavaScript, basic HTML, and CSS. I worked through code challenges and mini projects until my eyes blurred. I wasn't planning to stay a receptionist forever. I was building something, piece by piece, where no one could see. At work, I slowly started volunteering for more responsibilities. It started with small things, helping the marketing team fix bugs on the website, suggesting tweaks to our internal systems. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just did the work. And over time, people noticed. Priya Kapoor, our CTO, pulled me aside one day after I fixed a particularly nasty CRM issue that had been causing problems for months. "Have you ever thought about switching teams?" she asked casually. I didn't hesitate. By January, I had formally transitioned from receptionist to junior developer. My pay bumped up significantly. I had a real desk now, not the front one facing the doors. I was working late, building features, suggesting improvements, sitting in meetings with people who used to just nod at me in the hallway. In March, our CEO decided to put together a conference to showcase our company's innovations and vision for the future. A big move, especially for a startup like ours. Evan, who had always liked my drive, asked me if I'd be willing to give a keynote, to tell my story, to show how talent could be found in unexpected places. I said yes before the words even finished leaving his mouth. When I told my family, it was over Sunday brunch at my parents' house. Sunlight streamed through the windows onto the perfectly arranged plates of croissants and fruit. I mentioned it casually between bites of quiche. "I'm giving a keynote next month," I said, reaching for coffee. "At a tech conference. Pretty big deal. My father offered a distracted "that's nice." Amelia smiled politely. Simon gave a half-hearted cool. My mother didn't even look up. "Oh, a little company event," she said, stirring her tea. "That's sweet." I didn't correct her. I just slid an invitation across the table and moved on. The day of the conference felt surreal. The Austin Convention Center buzzed with activity. I stood backstage, heart pounding in my chest, listening to the chatter of over 2,000 people settling into their seats. I peeked out from behind the curtain, and there she was. My mother, sitting primarily in the front row, Amelia and Simon flanking her. I stepped onto the stage and into the blinding lights. Microphone clipped to my jacket, I took a breath and began. I talked about starting at the very bottom. About people underestimating you. About how sometimes, the people closest to you don't believe in your dreams, and that's okay, you believe in yourself anyway. I talked about coding at night, about taking risks, about carving out space when none was given to you. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. When I finished, the applause was loud enough to shake the floor. I scanned the crowd briefly. My mother's face was unreadable. Applauding, yes, but with that tight, practiced smile she always used when she didn't know what else to do. Later at the networking event, the air was electric. Strangers approached me with compliments and business cards. CEOs, startup founders, investors, all shaking my hand, praising my work. And then, through the crowd, came my mother. She looked at me, purse clutched tightly under one arm, and said, "Well, that was unexpected." I smiled. "Thanks for coming." Amelia hugged me tightly, murmuring, "You were incredible." Simon clapped me on the back, a rare show of affection. My mother just stood there, searching for something to say. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally just patted my arm and said, "Proud of you." It sounded like she was testing the words out for the first time. Over the next few months, everything shifted. She started casually mentioning me to her friends. "Elise works in tech, you know. Very successful. She's always been brilliant with computers." As if that had always been the narrative. As if she hadn't spent years dismissing me. I tried to let it roll off my back. Sometimes, I succeeded. Other times, the bitterness crept in. Because it wasn't really about whether she bragged about me now. It was about where she had been when I was struggling, when I needed belief and encouragement and unconditional support, and she gave me nothing but condescension. I thought maybe the anger would fade. But it hasn't. Not really. Over the following weeks, my life felt like it had entered a strange split reality. At work, things accelerated fast. After the conference, new clients came pouring in, citing my keynote as a reason for reaching out. Evan praised me in every leadership meeting. Priya started grooming me for a management role. I was put in charge of a small team, actual employees reporting to me, people I used to fetch coffee for when I was at the front desk. I worked late hours again, but this time it wasn't desperation driving me, it was excitement. I was finally building something real. I was finally being seen. Meanwhile, back in my family world, the revisionist history campaign was in full swing. My mother now introduced me to anyone who would listen as "my daughter, the tech genius." She'd embellish little details, telling friends that she always knew Elise would do something amazing, that she had encouraged her to explore computers when she was little. I'd listen in stunned silence, biting my tongue to the point of pain. Because the truth was, when I was younger, I loved computers. Loved tinkering. Loved breaking things just to figure out how to put them back together. But my mother had mocked it as a nerdy phase and tried to push me into piano lessons, ballet classes, debutante balls, anything that looked better in a family Christmas card. Now, suddenly, she was painting herself as my biggest champion. One afternoon, about a month after the conference, she called me. I stared at the screen flashing "Mom" and almost didn't pick up. But something in me was curious. I answered, and after a few moments of awkward small talk, she got to the point. "There's a luncheon next week," she said briskly. Women's League of Austin. Very prestigious. I got you a speaking slot. There was a pause on my end. A speaking slot, I repeated slowly. Yes, she said, as if it were obvious. They want someone young, successful, inspiring. It would look wonderful for you. And of course, wonderful for us. That last part slipped out so naturally, she probably didn't even realize she'd said it. For us. As if my success was now a family heirloom she could proudly display on her mantle. I declined politely, citing work obligations. She huffed but didn't argue. Hanging up, I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of anger and sadness swirling in my chest. It was never about me. It was about how I made her look. And part of me hated how badly a small, wounded piece inside me still wanted her approval. Around the same time, I started noticing strange things happening at work too. At first, it was small. Someone else getting credit for a project I spearheaded. Being left off an important email chain. A few meetings I should have been invited to, conveniently forgotten. I brushed it off. Growing pains, I told myself. Office politics. Nothing personal. But when Priya pulled me into her office late one evening, her face serious, I knew it was something more. Elise, she said gently, someone's been raising concerns about you to senior leadership. I blinked, stunned. What kind of concerns? That you're moving too fast. That you're inexperienced. That you're taking on projects above your level. My stomach twisted into a knot. I knew immediately who it was. Claire, another developer, senior to me by a few years, who had been cold to me ever since I moved off the front desk. I had thought it was just mild resentment. But apparently, it ran deeper. Priya leaned forward, voice calm but firm. I don't believe it, she said. Your work speaks for itself. But not everyone is thrilled when someone breaks the mold. Especially not when they used to think you were beneath them. The old doubts crept in, insidious and familiar. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe I had gotten lucky. Maybe I was out of my depth. I nodded mutely, promising to stay focused, but the encounter left me rattled. I started second-guessing everything. At home, I'd lay awake at night, replaying every meeting, every email, wondering if I'd said too much, sounded too confident, stepped on the wrong toes. The imposter syndrome I thought I'd left behind came roaring back with a vengeance. Meanwhile, my mother doubled down on her social tour. She invited me to more events, pushing me into photo ops, introducing me as if she were my agent, my manager, my personal PR machine. I tried setting boundaries, politely declining invitations, explaining that I was too busy. She didn't take it well. At brunch one Sunday, she snapped in front of the whole family. I just don't understand why you're being so difficult, she said sharply, pushing her mimosa aside. After everything I've done for you. Simon and Amelia exchanged a look. Dad coughed awkwardly into his coffee. I stared at her, heart pounding. Everything you've done for me? I thought of all the years of disapproval, of being made to feel small and foolish. I thought of her rolling her eyes when I said I liked computers. I thought of Thanksgiving where she told me, flat out, to stay in my lane. I thought of all the nights spent alone with my laptop, trying to build a life she would never have helped me build. But I said nothing. Because somehow, even now, part of me still didn't want to be the bad daughter. The ungrateful one. I smiled tightly, picking up my fork again. Sorry, Mom, I said lightly. Work's just crazy right now. The conversation shifted to safer topics, vacation plans, real estate prices, but the undercurrent of tension lingered like a bad aftertaste. After that, I pulled away even more. Focused harder on work. But the betrayal inside the office walls only worsened. Claire had friends. Allies. People who had been at the company longer than I had. I didn't stand a chance against the whisper network she had built. By late spring, I could feel the tides turning against me. Projects I pitched were quietly shelved. I wasn't invited to major meetings. My team started getting reassigned to other managers. One Friday afternoon, Priya called me into her office again. This time, she looked pained. "Evan's making some changes," she said carefully. "Restructuring leadership. They're bringing in someone more seasoned to oversee your department." Translation: someone with a resume that wouldn't make certain people uncomfortable. Someone who hadn't started at the front desk. I was being demoted without the courtesy of saying the word out loud. I nodded numbly, my ears ringing. "You're still a critical part of the team," Priya added quickly. "We don't want to lose you." But we both knew what it really meant. I packed my things that night when the office was dark and empty. No fanfare. No goodbye party. Just a cardboard box and the heavy weight of disappointment in my chest. Driving home through the neon-lit Austin streets, the city felt unfamiliar. Alien. It wasn't just losing the job. It was everything. It was realizing that no matter how hard you work, how much you prove yourself, there are people, sometimes even people you love, who will always see you as the girl who should have stayed in her lane. When I got home, I sat in the dark, Django curled up at my feet, and let the silence swallow me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what came next. The next few weeks passed in a haze. I kept telling myself I should be doing something, applying for jobs, updating my resume, reaching out to contacts. But every time I sat down at my laptop, my fingers froze. I couldn't summon the energy to market myself again, to rebuild everything I had just lost. Austin felt different now. I noticed the cracks I'd ignored before, the tech scene's obsession with networking over substance, the way women like me were praised in public and undermined in private. At night, I lay in bed with Django curled against my side, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles overhead, feeling a deep emptiness settle in my bones. One afternoon, as I sat in a cafe nursing a lukewarm coffee and pretending to scroll job listings, I overheard two men at the next table talking excitedly about a startup idea. Something about that conversation woke something in me. I realized I was sick of waiting for permission. Sick of fitting myself into spaces that were never built for me to begin with. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was reckless. But the thought gripped me tighter than fear ever had. I would build my own thing. It started small, almost embarrassingly small, just me, my laptop, and an empty notebook I bought from a dollar store down the block. I sketched out ideas. Platforms that connect freelance developers to startups. Community-driven coding hubs. I thought about all the barriers I had faced, the gatekeeping, the cliques, the silent biases, and how I could tear some of them down for others. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. I just knew I couldn't stomach another conference room filled with polite smiles masking knives. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of excitement. I worked out of coffee shops and public libraries, living mostly on savings and cheap takeout. I downsized my apartment, letting go of things I didn't need, a too expensive couch, designer handbags my mother had once brought to polish my image. There was a certain freedom in it, even as it scared me. Meanwhile, my mother was blissfully unaware. To her, I was still the golden success story she could parade around. She had no idea I wasn't climbing another corporate ladder, I was standing at the bottom of a cliff, staring up with no safety net. She called me often, usually under the pretext of checking in but always with an agenda buried just beneath. "So, what's new at work?" she'd ask brightly. I'd give vague answers, deflecting as best I could. I wasn't ready to tell her. I wasn't ready for the inevitable judgment, the carefully worded concerns, the thinly veiled disappointment. One Sunday, Amelia invited me over for lunch, just the two of us. We sat on her back patio, the Texas sun hot and sticky, sipping iced tea as she watched me closely. "You okay?" she asked finally. I nodded, but the lie must have been obvious. "Mom's been telling everyone you're moving up again," she said, not unkindly. "VP soon," she says. I snorted before I could stop myself. Amelia just raised an eyebrow, setting her glass down. "Maybe you should tell her the truth," she said gently. Maybe, I said, picking at a thread on my sleeve. Or maybe I just let her believe whatever makes her happy. Amelia didn't push. She never did. But later, driving home, her words stuck with me. Was I protecting myself? Or protecting her? And why did part of me still care? As the months dragged on, my project, my dream, started to take shape. I built the first version of my platform, a scrappy, barely holding together website that connected freelance developers to small businesses needing affordable tech solutions. I called it Bridge Code. It was messy. It was buggy. It was mine. At first, it was slow. A few signups here and there. A couple of projects posted. Nothing glamorous. But I treated every small win like it mattered. I called clients personally. I fixed every broken line of code myself. I wrote newsletters and blog posts at 3 in the morning, fueled by coffee and desperation. Word spread. Slowly, but surely. By the end of the year, we had over 300 active users. Enough that I could finally, barely, pay myself a small salary again. Enough that investors started circling. And that's when the real test came. One night, I got an email from a local venture capital firm requesting a meeting. I almost deleted it, convinced it had to be spam. But curiosity won. I met them in a sleek downtown office, all glass walls and cold brew taps. They were impressed by Bridge Code's growth. Impressed enough to offer a small seed investment. It wasn't millions. But it was enough to take things to the next level. Enough to hire a real team. Enough to turn this fragile dream into something real. I sat in my car after the meeting, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had done it. Alone. No fancy introductions. No cushy internships. No family connections. Just me and every scar I had earned the hard way. Driving home, I allowed myself a small smile. And that's when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Of course it was. She left a voicemail, chirpy, excited, as if she could feel something shifting even without knowing the details. Hey sweetie, just wondering if you're free next weekend? There's a gala at the country club. Lots of important people. Would love for you to come, you never know who you might meet. I listened to it twice, my heart sinking a little lower each time. It was never about celebrating me. It was about showing me off. A new accessory she could parade around in front of her friends, polished and perfect, proof that she had been a good mother all along. Proof that she had won. I sat there in the dark parking lot, torn between anger and exhaustion. Because deep down, I knew that no matter how successful I became, no matter how many conferences I spoke at, or companies I built, there would always be a part of me that wanted her to be proud for the right reasons. Not because of how I made her look. But because of who I actually was. For once, though, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need her permission to be proud of myself. Still, the ache lingered. Some wounds don't heal all the way. They just scare you and teach you how to move differently. I stared out at the empty street, the city lights flickering in the distance, and wondered what my next move would be. I didn't call my mother back. Instead, I poured myself into the next phase of building Bridge Code. The seed funding allowed me to hire 2 brilliant developers, Maya and Andre, who were hungry, creative, and scrappy like me. We rented a small co-working space near South Congress, nothing fancy, but it felt like ours. I even let Django come to work with me some days, his tail thudding against the walls as he roamed the narrow halls. Every decision, every late night, every small setback and tiny triumph, it was mine. And slowly, surely, Bridge Code grew. Within 6 months, we had our first major contract with a mid-sized healthcare startup that needed a full platform build. Then a law firm. Then an education company. Word spread, if you needed affordable, reliable tech talent fast, you went through Bridge Code. It wasn't just work anymore. It was a movement. I started getting invited to speak again, only this time on my own terms. panels about women in tech, interviews with local magazines, guest articles in industry newsletters. My name started circulating far beyond Austin. And that's when the email came. It was from the organizers of Tech South, one of the biggest technology conferences in the southern US. They were inviting me, to be a headliner. Not just a speaker. A keynote headliner. I sat there staring at the email, rereading it over and over. A wide, stunned smile spread across my face. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. This was bigger than anything I'd ever dared to dream of. After all the years of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Here I was. And for once, it was undeniable. There was no spinning it. No rewriting the past. I accepted the invitation before I could even second-guess myself. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Speech drafts, meetings with event coordinators, wardrobe fittings, it felt surreal. My mother, of course, caught wind of it almost immediately. Amelia, who had stayed in touch and quietly cheered me on through everything, let it slip over brunch that Mom had been telling everyone at the club about my keynote. "She's planning a watch party," Amelia said, half smiling, half sighing. "Renting out the private dining room." I groaned internally. Of course she was. In her mind, this was her achievement, too. A final stamp of validation. For a minute, I considered shutting it all down. Telling her not to come. Making a scene. But then a better idea formed, a quieter, sharper kind of revenge. One that didn't involve screaming or fighting or cruelty. Just truth. Simple, undeniable truth. The day of Tech South arrived. The Austin Convention Center was packed, far bigger than anything I had spoken at before. Thousands of industry leaders, journalists, investors, and students. The kind of crowd that could change a life. Backstage, my heart hammered against my ribs. I wore a sleek navy jumpsuit, strong, simple, no frills. My hair pulled back, makeup clean and sharp. I looked like the woman I had fought to become. I peeked out at the audience. Front row, as expected, sat my mother, perfectly coiffed, expensive pearls gleaming under the stage lights. Simon and Amelia were there too, Amelia giving me a small encouraging thumbs up. I smiled tightly. When they introduced me, Elise Brennan, founder and CEO of Bridgecode, the applause was deafening. I walked out into the spotlight and looked out at the sea of faces. And then I began. "My story doesn't start with success," I said, voice clear and strong. "It starts with being underestimated." I paused, letting the words settle. I started in tech the way many women do, overlooked, underestimated, pushed to the margins. I was a receptionist. And every day, I heard the same unspoken message: stay in your lane. The crowd murmured, shifting in their seats. But I didn't stay in my lane, I continued, meeting their eyes one by one. I built my own road. I told them everything. Learning to code after work, taking on projects no one wanted, clawing my way into spaces that weren't designed to let me in. I talked about the quiet betrayals, the backhanded compliments, the cold shoulders. I didn't name my mother. I didn't have to. But I told the truth. Unvarnished. Unflinching. I ended with Bridgecode, what we had built, what we stood for, and how it wasn't just about technology. It was about refusing to wait for permission to succeed. When I finished, the standing ovation was immediate. Thunderous. I stepped back, blinking against the bright stage lights, letting the wave of sound wash over me. I stole a glance at the front row. My mother was standing, clapping, but her smile was brittle, her eyes glassy. Because she knew. Everyone around her knew. No matter what she had told her friends at the country club, no matter how many watch parties she hosted, no matter how many times she tried to take credit, she hadn't built this. I had. And no amount of revisionist history could ever erase that now. After the conference, I was swarmed, reporters, fellow founders, investors eager to throw money at Bridgecode's next phase. I didn't see my mother approach at first. But then she was there, perfectly composed, pulling me into a hug that felt strangely stiff. "You were wonderful," she said tightly into my ear. "Absolutely wonderful." I pulled back and smiled warmly, genuinely this time. "Thanks, Mom," I said. And that was it. No fighting. No screaming. No scenes. Just a simple, quiet acknowledgement. She had to live with the truth now. She had to live with the knowledge that I had succeeded not because of her, but despite her. In the weeks that followed, the offers rolled in. Partnerships, media requests, funding opportunities. Bridgecode expanded rapidly, eventually opening a second office in Dallas. I built a diverse, fiercely loyal team. I started a mentorship program for young women and minorities trying to break into tech. The kind of program I had desperately needed once. At family gatherings, my mother still introduced me with polished pride, but her voice was different now. Less possessive. More cautious. As if she finally realized she couldn't shape the story anymore. She was just another spectator. Watching. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.